Welcome, Red Eyes members. Thank you very much for joining us here in the member section. We are having a really interesting discussion with Andrew D.Basiago about Project Pegasus, about life on Mars, time travel technology, the Chronovisor-Device, and the kind of two different paths that Andrew has been explaining to us, the natural history path, so to speak, of life that has been discovered on Mars, and the deep exopolitical perspective on this as well. And I don't really know where to begin here because I have so many questions, obviously, at this point. Maybe you just can talk to us a little bit about the web here at the beginning, because that's an interesting one as well. You mentioned that DARPA kind of known about this, the development on the internet, and they, of course, later on, as you said, developed the ARPANET. Do you think that they developed the internet for a specific purpose because they saw it in the future, because it would benefit them in some way, or is there another reason for them to go ahead with this? What do you think?
Well, that's a very difficult and important question, and so let me try to parse that and try to give more of the backstory by what I mean by the quantum access capability that emerged in the late 1960s in the context of the U.S. defense community and defense technical community. Essentially, by 1967-68, they had developed a teleporter from one part of the plans, the schematics and drawings and formulae that Nikola Tesla left at his death in January of 1943, and we know those were forwarded to the Los-Alamos physics community around the time that Los-Alamos became the hub for the Manhattan Project and the development of the atomic bomb. And that made perfect sense because that's where the world's leading physicists were being sent. There was also a device called a chronovisor that emerged in the 40s, which was an electro-optical device that emerged from the research of two Vatican scientists named Ernetti and Gemelli that propagated by the mid-1960s holograms of past and future events. So it was during the late 1960s and later that the U.S. intelligence community began doing things like sending individuals to distant points, non-local points in the time-space continuum, to the past, for example, either physically sending them there or sending them there through virtual time travel in one of the chronovisors. It really didn't matter because as long as they were, tuning in the hologram from the past, that was just like sending somebody there physically.
Yes.
So they began to gather intelligence by doing so, by using trained personnel in probes, involving them in probes to the past and future via either teleportation or chronovision. Just as they were sending people mentally in time-space by developing psychics as conventional remote viewers during those years. Now, the thrust of Project Pegasus was not necessarily time travel technology. It was an intelligence project under the umbrella of DARPA, the primary thrust of which, as articulated, in fact, in a DARPA technical paper that I was required to read when I was a child participant on Project Pegasus, was remote sensing in time. In other words, they wanted to assist the logistical planning of the president and other executive branch agencies, including the military, in gathering information from the past and from the future. And they had determined that regarding both of those realms, they didn't want to change the past or the future. They wanted to honor the prime directive. And so, for example, in our training, we were told to avoid disturbing anything in the environments we were going to.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But I also know that in that context of scientists and engineers and U.S. intelligence agents and child participants like myself and some of the contact people of the Pentagon like Don Rumsfeld, when we were socializing, it became evident to me that intelligence reports were being promulgated and circulated among the project personnel. So among the things I remember hearing about as a child socializing in the company of my late father with people like Edward Teller or Dr. Harold Agnew of the Los-Alamos Labs or Dr. William Shockley, who was then the principal technical advisor of the U.S. Army, or Donald Rumsfeld, let's say, or some of the CIA people that would float through, some of the future politicians that would float through who were being briefed about their destinies as American leaders, the Bushes, Donald Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld, Bill Clinton, although we didn't meet Clinton. His name was spoken of. What was happening was they were circulating information from the future that they were getting through different means, from psychics who were asked to look at the holograms of what the future meant, to trained observers who were doing so, to people, mostly children like myself, who were asked to stand on the stage when the hologram was generated around them, and we experienced a form of virtual time travel, being in that past or future place, all the way to individuals who later included myself, who were physically visiting past and future events via the advanced form of teleportation that was operational from around 1970. So they were collecting information and sharing it. A number of the things I remember them talking about were the Bill Clinton presidency. I remember they talked about the advent of the Internet, and I know that 9/11 was not only spoken around me, but that my father and I saw about 18 to 20 seconds of footage of one of the planes hitting one of the Twin Towers during 9/11. When those images were being processed and had been discovered and were being processed at the Aerojet Corporation facility in Socorro, New Mexico. So the major events of my generation, I remember them talking about, just shop talk when I was on the project as a kid, were those data points, the advent of the Internet, the Clinton presidency, and 9/11.
More, Andrew, can you say something more about 9/11? I mean, again, there's a lot of theories out there right now that goes into the fact that U.S. Government covertly, or a rogue faction within the government, has been responsible for 9/11. Is this something you think that they actually brought about in order to advance their agenda, currently the geopolitical agenda at this point?
They may have, but as a tactical matter related to my true account of what I experienced in Project Pegasus, I've avoided immersing myself in the 9/11 debate because I was afraid people would be confused by what I was saying and maybe interpolate some other theories of causation that I'm not really stating. What I'm saying is that I know to a moral, a legal, scientific certainty that the U.S. Defense Department, indeed this project that Donald Rumsfeld was the defense attaché for, was in possession of moving images of the 9/11 event, and that the 9/11 event as a domestic Pearl Harbor was spoken of around the lunch table a couple times in my presence in the early 1970s when I was on the project. It's possible that it was launched by a faction of the U.S. Permanent Secret Government as an inside job, as my friend and really gifted investigator Jim Mars has concluded.
Yes.
I don't doubt it, but I don't have any information that establishes that that's the case. But I do have information establishing that as a result of its quantum access capability, the U.S. Defense Department had prior knowledge of 9/11 going back 30 years. So that might explain some of the things that happened on 9/11. For example, the president stating that he had seen the first plane hit the first building.
Right.
And he was able to say, "Boy, that what a bad pilot." The fact that the National Security Advisor at that time, Condoleezza Rice, informed former Mayor Willie Brown of San Francisco not to fly that morning. The fact that they had moved the president to a grammar school in Florida the day of the event, and that he wasn't moved from that location expeditiously after the event had occurred. He should have been moved immediately to a non-public location, certainly. So there are some sort of lacunae, some strange cul-de-sacs in the overall story that I think are explainable in terms of the fact that the U.S. government had prior knowledge of the event and at a minimum let it happen. And I believe that they let it happen because not only was the consensus opinion of the people attached to Project Pegasus that they shouldn't play God and try to influence future events as a result of having prior knowledge of them, but the problem with doing that, there was an impediment to doing that, and that is if you have knowledge of a future event of substantial magnitude, like the September 11th attacks, and you actively work to thwart them so they don't happen, what you end up doing is diverting and thereby vitiating the quality of your intelligence database regarding all the future facts you've collected after that time, after that point in time, because you've now diverted the very future you were studying with your quantum access technologies.
Right.
So I believe that the philosophical and religious